Iran is burning. Russia is restless. The United States is divided. 3 countries, 3 different systems, 3 rival powers. Yet at the same moment in history, millions of people are on the streets. This is not normal. Protests erupt in Iran, challenging authority and survival. Protests simmer in Russia, where silence itself has become dangerous. Protests explode in the United States, tearing society apart from the inside. Different flags, different languages, different enemies. But the same question echoes everywhere. Is something big coming? History teaches us one rule without exception. When unrest spreads across rival powers at the same time, the world never stays the same. This documentary is not about news clips. It is about patterns. It is about pressure. And it is about what happens before the world changes forever. Iran is no stranger to protests. But what makes the current unrest different is not just anger, it is exhaustion. For decades, the Iranian population has lived under economic sanctions, political restrictions, and international isolation. Each year, life becomes more expensive. Each year, opportunities become fewer. And each year, hope erodes a little more. Inflation has crushed the middle class. Basic necessities cost more than many families can afford. Youth unemployment remains dangerously high, creating a generation that feels locked out of its own future. When people believe tomorrow will be worse than today, fear turns into rage. That rage eventually finds the streets. Iranian protests are not just about one policy or one leader. They are about survival. They are about dignity. And they are about a population that feels trapped between external pressure from the world and internal pressure from the system itself. Every protest crackdown adds more resentment. Every arrest creates 10 more voices of anger. What the outside world often misunderstands is this: protests in Iran are not spontaneous chaos. They are pressure leaks in a system that has been under strain for decades. And pressure, when it has nowhere to escape, always looks for a breaking point. Russia's protests look different. They are quieter, smaller, more dangerous. In Russia, protesting is not just an act of anger, it is an act of courage. Years of strict laws, surveillance, and arrests have trained society to remain silent. But silence does not mean satisfaction. It means fear. And fear, when prolonged, transforms into resentment. Economic pressure from international sanctions has reached ordinary Russians. Prices rise, jobs disappear, futures shrink. Add to this the long-term impact of war fatigue, loss of life, and uncertainty, and the result is a society under psychological stress. Under Vladimir Putin, stability has always been the promise. But stability without prosperity eventually collapses under its own weight. When people feel they are sacrificing endlessly without reward, loyalty fades. Russian protests do not always fill streets. Sometimes they appear as strikes. Sometimes as online dissent. Sometimes as quiet refusal. But history proves one thing clearly. When silence starts cracking in authoritarian systems, the consequences are never small.
The United States presents a different kind of unrest. It is not about survival. It is about division. America is experiencing one of the deepest internal fractures in its modern history. Political polarization has turned neighbors into enemies. Trust in institutions has collapsed. Inflation, housing costs, healthcare expenses, and economic inequality have created a sense of betrayal among large sections of society. Under Joe Biden, protests erupt from multiple sides left-right, and everything in between. Some protest government policies, others protest the system itself. Some protest elections, others protest social identity. The danger for the United States is not protests alone. Democracies survive protests. The danger is loss of shared reality. When people no longer agree on truth, law, or legitimacy, unrest becomes permanent. America's streets reflect a deeper crisis, not of leadership, but of trust. And once trust breaks, rebuilding it is far harder than maintaining it.
Iran, Russia, and the United States have nothing in common on paper. Different ideologies, different systems, different enemies. Yet the same forces are pushing people onto the streets. Rising cost of living, fear of the future, loss of trust in leadership, feeling unheard. This is the pattern history watches carefully. When unrest appears simultaneously in rival powers, it is not coincidence. It signals a deeper global imbalance. Economic systems tighten at the same time. Political legitimacy weakens together. Global shocks ripple across borders faster than governments can respond. The world is more connected than ever. A financial shock in one region affects another. A war in one zone raises prices everywhere. A political crisis spreads through screens, not borders. What we are witnessing is not three separate protests. We are witnessing one global stress event expressing itself differently in three powerful nations. History never announces itself loudly at first. It whispers. Before World War I, protests erupted across Europe. Before the collapse of the Soviet Union, unrest spread silently. Before the Arab Spring, small demonstrations were ignored. In every case, leaders dismissed unrest as manageable. In every case, the world changed shortly after. Mass protests do not always lead to revolution. Sometimes they lead to war, sometimes to reform, sometimes to collapse, but they always mean the system is under stress. The most dangerous moment is not when protests begin. It is when leaders believe they can ignore them. What makes this moment unique is timing. Iran is under sanctions pressure. Russia is under war and economic pressure. The United States is under political and social pressure. Three pressure points. One global system. Global inflation. Supply chain shocks. Energy instability. Political distrust. Information warfare. The world has entered a phase where small sparks can trigger massive consequences. Protests are no longer isolated events. They are indicators, warning lights on the dashboard of global stability. History shows us something uncomfortable. Protests are rarely the event itself. They are the symptom. The real story always unfolds after the crowds appear. Governments do not collapse the moment people enter the streets. Instead, systems begin to react slowly, often defensively, sometimes violently. Leaders make choices under pressure, and those choices decide whether a nation reforms, represses, or explodes. When protests grow, states usually follow one of three paths. The first path is reform offering concessions, easing pressure, and restoring trust. This path requires humility and political courage, and it is the rarest choice. The second path is repression, using force, arrest, censorship, and fear to push people back into silence. This path works temporarily but plants seeds of future instability. The third path is distraction, redirecting public attention toward an external enemy, a crisis, or even a war. What makes the current global moment dangerous is that multiple powerful countries are facing unrest at the same time. This limits their ability to absorb pressure. When leaders feel cornered domestically, they often behave more aggressively internationally. History confirms this pattern again and again. This is the question governments never ask publicly, but strategists always consider privately. When internal unrest grows, external conflict can sometimes unite divided populations, at least temporarily. Fear replaces anger. Patriotism replaces protest. Attention shifts from domestic problems to national survival. This does not mean wars are always planned to distract people. But it does mean that leaders under pressure are more likely to take risks. Diplomatic restraint weakens. Military signaling increases. Red lines blur. In a world already tense with conflicts in multiple regions, protests inside major powers increase the risk of miscalculation. One wrong move, one escalation, one incident that spirals beyond control. The danger is not that leaders want chaos. The danger is that pressure clouds judgment, and judgment, once lost, is rarely regained in time. Behind protests in Iran, Russia, and the United States lies a shared force that crosses borders: economic pressure. Inflation has become a silent enemy worldwide. It does not arrive with tanks or missiles. It arrives through grocery bills, rent increases, fuel prices, and shrinking savings. When people work harder but fall further behind, faith in the system collapses. This is not ideology, it is mathematics. No political speech can convince a population that life is improving when their lived reality says otherwise. Globalization has connected economies so tightly that a shock in one region spreads instantly. War affects energy prices. Sanctions affect supply chains. Pandemics affect labor markets. And ordinary people, regardless of country, pay the price. In previous eras, protests spread slowly. News traveled through newspapers and word of mouth. Today, anger spreads at the speed of algorithms. Social media amplifies outrage, compresses context, and rewards emotional extremes. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. Images of protests in one country inspire others elsewhere. Narratives jump borders instantly. Governments struggle to control information without appearing authoritarian. Trust erodes faster than ever before. What we are witnessing is not just unrest, it is synchronized unrest. Digital platforms have created a shared emotional space where frustration multiplies instead of dissipating. This does not cause protests by itself, but it accelerates them once conditions exist. The world has entered an age where control of narrative is as important as control of territory, and most governments are losing that battle. External enemies are predictable. Internal unrest is not. Powerful states invest enormous resources into military defense, intelligence agencies, and border security. Yet history proves that the most dangerous threat often comes from within, not because people are enemies, but because legitimacy is fragile. When citizens believe their sacrifices are meaningless, loyalty disappears. When laws feel unfair, obedience fades. When leaders appear disconnected, authority weakens. This fear explains why governments react so strongly to protests. They understand something fundamental. Weapons control territory, but people control legitimacy. Once legitimacy breaks, no amount of force can fully restore it. Many analysts speak quietly about a coming global reset, not as a conspiracy, but as a structural shift. Old systems are struggling to manage new realities. Economic models built for stability are failing under constant crisis. Political systems designed for consensus are collapsing under polarization. Protests are not the cause of this transformation. They are the evidence of it. The world is transitioning from one era to another, and transitions are always unstable. The question is not whether change is coming. The question is how violent or controlled that change will be. Several paths lie ahead, and none are guaranteed. One possibility is gradual reform. Governments adapt, reduce pressure, and restore limited trust. This path is slow and uncertain, but least destructive. Another possibility is increased repression. Protests are crushed, silence returns, but anger goes underground. This creates short-term stability and long-term danger. The most dangerous possibility is escalation internal unrest combined with external conflict. History warns us clearly about this path. When systems break under pressure, they do not break quietly. Iran, Russia, the United States, three rivals. Three systems. One moment in time. Protests are not happening because people suddenly became angry. They are happening because pressure has reached a level where silence is no longer possible. The world stands at a crossroads that history recognizes well. The early signs are here. The patterns are visible. The warning lights are flashing. Whether this moment leads to reform, repression, or rupture will define the next chapter of global history. Because when unrest spreads across the world's most powerful nations at the same time, the future is never written quietly.